The beautiful Apache woman fell off her horse and broke her leg. Only a lonely farmer helped her. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the wide plains with golden light. The wind whispered gently through the tall grasses, carrying the scent of wild flowers and the faint dust of the earth. Among the rolling hills and open fields, a lone figure rode gracefully on a strong chestnut horse. Narration. She was an Apache woman, known in her village for both her beauty and courage. Her long, dark hair danced behind her as the horse trotted swiftly across the plain. Barash. Every movement she made showed confidence. Every glance reflected strength. She was proud of her independence and her connection to the land she called home. The plains had always been a place of freedom for her. From a young age, she had learned to ride, run, and live with nature. The horses were her companions, and the open sky her ceiling. She loved feeling the wind on her face, the soft rumble of hooves on the earth beneath her, and the thrill of riding fast along paths that twisted and turned through rocks and hills. Her life was one of adventure and simplicity, yet filled with a sense of pride and dignity. That afternoon had started like any other. She had saddled her favorite horse, a spirited but obedient mare, and set off on a journey to gather herbs and check on some distant lands her family used for hunting and gathering. The sky was clear, and the sun warmed her back as she rode. The song carried by the breeze, echoing across the empty plains. Birds fluttered from tree to tree, and even the deer in the distance paused for a moment, sensing her presence. It was a world that seemed untouched by time, a world where she felt completely at home. But the plains, as beautiful as they were, could also be unpredictable. The path she followed was narrow and rocky, winding through low hills and scattered stones. She knew the route well, having traveled it many times, yet something in the air made her senses sharper that day. Perhaps it was the wind, stronger than usual, or the shadows of the clouds moving quickly across the land. She tightened her grip on the reins and leaned forward slightly, guiding her horse carefully. Suddenly, the mare stumbled. Her front hooves hit a hidden rock, and her balance wavered. The Apache woman tried to steady the horse, whispering soothing words and shifting her weight, but it was too late. The horse pitched forward and she was thrown violently from the saddle. She hit the ground with a sharp, painful thud. Pain shot through her leg, and she cried out, her voice echoing across the empty plain. The wind carried her scream, but there was no one nearby to hear it. She lay there for a moment, dazed and confused, her breathing heavy. The horse, startled, ran a few steps before stopping, snorting and pawing at the ground. She tried to move, but her leg would not obey her. A sharp pain ran from her hip down to her ankle. She looked down and realized that something was terribly wrong. Her leg was twisted in a way it should not have been. Fear crept in, but she fought it back. She had survived difficult situations before, and she knew she could survive this too, but only if she could find help. The sun continued to dip toward the horizon, turning the sky into shades of orange, pink, and purple. Shadows lengthened, and the temperature began to drop. Bay. She was alone. The nearest village was miles away, and the path back was too dangerous for her to walk. She called out again, her voice trembling this time, but there was no answer. Her throat was dry, and her body ached from the fall. She felt a wave of panic rising inside her, a feeling she had never allowed herself to experience before. She tried to remember the lessons her elders had taught her. Stay calm, they had said. Think clearly. Do not give up. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. The plains were vast, but they were not entirely silent. She could hear the distant cry of a hawk, the rustle of small animals in the grass, and the occasional whisper of the wind. Narration. You that help could come, but only if someone happened to be passing by. The thought of waiting alone in the cold and dark made her shiver, but she refused to give in to despair. Hours passed slowly. The sun sank lower and lower until the first stars began to appear in the sky. She lay there, unable to move, feeling the ache in her body grow stronger. The horse returned slowly, nuzzling her gently as if trying to comfort her. Narration. She reached out to touch its mane, grateful for the small comfort. The night was cold, and she wrapped herself as best as she could in her cloak, leaning against the horse to keep warm. Narration. She thought about her family, wondering if they would notice she was missing. She worried, too, about the dangers that could come at night. Wild animals, harsh weather, or even the chance of being unseen until it was too late. Narration. Despite the fear, she did not cry. She remembered her mother's words. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to face it. Narration. She whispered a small prayer to herself, asking for strength, for safety, and for someone to find her. Narration. She tried to distract herself, thinking about the times she had ridden through these plains, the times she had laughed with friends, the stories her elders told her about brave women of her people. The memories gave her comfort, and slowly, though the pain was intense, her mind calmed. As the night grew darker, a faint sound reached her ears, a sound so soft she almost thought she imagined it. Narration. A human voice calling out from a distance. She strained to listen, and there it was again, clearer this time. Narration. She shouted, hoping her voice would carry. Help, please! Her voice cracked from pain and fear, but she kept shouting, refusing to give up. The sound of footsteps approached slowly through the grass, and a figure began to emerge from the darkness. The figure was a man, moving carefully, as if he did not want to startle her. He was a farmer known to live alone on the outskirts of the plains. His life had been quiet, filled with work and solitude. But tonight, he was walking toward her, guided by the sound of her cries. She could not see his face clearly in the dim light, but she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps help had finally arrived. She tried to smile through the pain as the man came closer. Narration. His presence brought relief, and for the first time since the fall, she felt less alone. Though she could not speak easily, she gestured toward her leg, trying to explain what had happened. Narration. The man nodded, understanding immediately that she needed care. He spoke softly, words she could not fully understand, but his tone was calm, kind, and reassuring. She felt a sense of trust forming, fragile but real. The plains were silent again, except for the soft murmurs of the two figures. Narration. The woman knew her life had changed in an instant. What had started as a simple ride across the beautiful plains had turned into a night of fear, pain, and uncertainty. Yet in the midst of this fear, a spark of hope had arrived, a human hand reaching out when she needed it most. She realized that sometimes, even in the most unexpected places, kindness could be found. As the night wore on, she leaned against the man's support, letting him help her sit upright. Her horse stood nearby, calm and patient, as if sensing the relief of its rider. The first part of her journey, the fall, the fear, and the long hours of waiting, was over, but her story was far from finished. She knew that the next hours would be filled with new challenges, healing, and the strange beginnings of a connection she had never expected. But for now, she allowed herself to rest, grateful that she had not been alone, grateful that someone had come when she needed them most. And under the vast sky of the plains, with stars twinkling above and the wind singing softly through the grass, a lonely farmer and a brave Apache woman faced the night together, neither knowing what the coming days would bring. but both understanding the quiet power of human kindness. The night air was cool, and the stars above twinkled brightly, casting a soft light over the plains. The Apache woman sat carefully, leaning against the farmer as he helped her balance. Operation. Her leg throbbed painfully, but she felt a strange sense of relief now that she was not alone. The man spoke softly, his voice calm and steady. She did not understand all his words, but his tone was kind, reassuring her that she was safe. His careful attention made her feel as if, for the first time since her fall, she might survive the night. The farmer guided her toward a narrow path that led to a small cabin, hidden among a few trees at the edge of the plains. The cabin was simple, made of wood and stone, with a small chimney that puffed smoke into the night sky. Inspiration. It was humble, with no decorations or fancy furniture, yet it radiated warmth and a sense of safety. She noticed that despite its simplicity, the cabin was clean and well kept, a testament to the farmer's quiet diligence. The journey to the cabin was slow and careful. Every step sent a jolt of pain through her leg, and she clenched her teeth to endure it. The farmer moved gently, supporting her weight with surprising strength. He spoke softly, asking questions she could not answer, yet she sensed his concern. Occasionally he would glance at her horse, which followed closely behind, as if watching over them both. Inspiration. She felt gratitude toward the animal for staying near, sensing her fear and weakness. When they reached the cabin, the farmer carefully helped her inside. A small fire burned in the hearth, filling the room with light and warmth. The smell of wood smoke mingled with a faint scent of herbs, giving the place a homey feel. The woman realized that this simple man who lived alone had created a space of comfort and security. Despite his quiet life, he had the ability to care for others, even someone he had never met before. He guided her to a sturdy chair and helped her sit down, placing her injured leg carefully on a soft cloth. She winced as the pain shot through her leg, and he nodded, understanding immediately. From a small cabinet he brought a few supplies: clean cloths, water, and herbs. With gentle hands, he cleaned the wound on her leg, carefully inspecting it. Inspiration. She gasped at the sting of the antiseptic herbs, but he murmured comforting words, and she felt the tension in her body ease slightly. As he worked, she began to observe him more closely. He was a man of simple appearance, wearing worn clothes and boots covered in dust from the plains. His face was weathered, marked by years of labor and solitude. Yet there was a softness in his eyes, a kindness that shone through every careful movement. She wondered about his life, the choices he had made to live alone, and why he had chosen to come to her aid without hesitation. Despite their differences, she felt a connection forming, fragile but undeniable. Time passed slowly, but the fire crackled softly, providing a comforting rhythm. She tried to speak, asking questions about him, but the words came haltingly. He answered in short, simple sentences, and though she did not understand everything, she could feel the honesty and warmth behind them. Communication between them was limited, but it was enough. Inspiration. There was a silent understanding growing, a recognition that both were human, both had fears and needs, and both were capable of kindness. The night deepened, and the temperature dropped. The farmer prepared a small bed on the floor near the fire, laying out soft blankets for her to rest. She felt embarrassed at first, unused to accepting help, yet her body ached, and exhaustion was taking over. With his guidance, she carefully lowered herself onto the blankets, her injured leg supported and elevated. He covered her with another blanket and sat nearby, keeping watch. Inspiration. She realized then that he had no reason to stay. He could have left her outside, yet he had chosen to stay, to protect her. This small act of care warmed her heart. Inspiration. Sleep came slowly. Pain from the injury kept her tossing and turning, yet the presence of the farmer beside her brought a strange sense of safety. Inspiration. How quickly her life could have ended on the cold, empty plains if he had not heard her cries. She had always prided herself on her independence, her strength, but tonight she realized that even the strongest people sometimes needed help. Inspiration. Humility and gratitude filled her mind as she drifted into a light, uneasy sleep. Morning arrived with soft sunlight filtering through the small windows. She woke to the smell of fresh bread and herbs cooking over a small stove. The farmer had already started his day, preparing a simple breakfast. He looked up and gave her a gentle nod, offering her some warm tea. She accepted, careful with her injured leg, and felt the warmth spread through her body. Brr. The simple gesture made her smile. Despite the silence of the plains outside, she was beginning to feel a sense of life inside this small cabin, a life created through quiet care and attention. Inspiration. The farmer moved with ease, fetching clean water and more herbs to tend to her leg. Inspiration. He worked carefully, wrapping it in fresh cloth and adjusting the splint he had made. She watched him, noticing the patience in every motion. Inspiration. There was no rush, no frustration, only calm, steady focus. She realized that he lived a life of simplicity, yet it was filled with quiet wisdom and a capacity for care that she had never truly appreciated before. Over the next few days, their routine formed. The Apache woman remained in the cabin, unable to walk freely, while the farmer brought her food, water, and tended to her injury. They communicated slowly, through gestures, simple words, and shared understanding. She learned about his farm, the crops he grew, and the life he had built alone. He learned about her life, her people, and her experiences in the vast lands they both called home. Though their worlds were different, the bond between them began to grow, rooted in respect, care, and mutual need. She noticed that despite his quiet nature, the farmer had a gentle humor. Small smiles and quiet jokes passed between them, bringing light moments to the otherwise serious days of recovery. She laughed more than she had in weeks, the sound bright and clear in the small cabin.
Even the horse seemed to respond to the changing mood, nuzzling her shoulder as if celebrating the easing of tension and fear.
For the first time since her fall, she felt a sense of hope. Hope that she would recover, hope that she was not alone, and hope that kindness could be found in unexpected places. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in soft shades of orange and purple, she realized how much she had come to rely on his presence. He had shown no judgment, no fear, only steady care. She felt gratitude deepen into something stronger, a connection that was hard to define but impossible to ignore. She thought about the plains outside, vast and beautiful, and how quickly life could change. One moment she had been free and independent, the next vulnerable and in need, and yet, in this quiet cabin she discovered a new strength, the strength of trust and the warmth of human kindness. The farmer noticed her watching the sunset and nodded toward the window. He spoke softly, his words almost musical in tone, though she could not fully understand. She smiled and nodded back, appreciating his effort to communicate. That small exchange felt significant, a reminder that connection did not always require perfect understanding. They could share moments, emotions, and care without needing the same words. Days turned into a week, and the Apache woman's leg slowly began to heal. The swelling went down, and the pain became more manageable. Each day she grew stronger, able to move with more confidence. The farmer continued to help her, guiding her steps, offering support, and sharing quiet conversation. Their friendship deepened, a bond forged not by words alone but by shared experience, care, and mutual respect. She learned that strength could come in many forms, not just in courage and skill, but in patience, kindness, and the willingness to help another person in need. Evenings were filled with small rituals. The woman would help him prepare simple meals, fetching herbs or chopping vegetables, careful not to strain her leg. They would sit by the fire afterward, listening to the wind outside, watching shadows dance on the walls, sharing stories with gestures and laughter. Inspiration. She felt a sense of peace she had never known before, a rare comfort in the presence of someone who truly cared for her well-being. The cabin became a sanctuary, a place where she could recover not just physically but emotionally, and begin to understand the quiet power of human kindness. By the end of the week, it was clear that she could walk short distances with his support. The farmer had proven patient and steady, never rushing her or allowing her to feel discouraged. Inspiration. She realized that while her journey on the plains had been dangerous and painful, it had also brought her to someone who saw and valued her as a person, beyond her beauty, beyond her pride, beyond the labels of her village. In him she had discovered not only help but friendship, trust, and a quiet strength that mirrored her own in ways she had never expected. And so, in the small cabin on the edge of the plains, a lonely farmer and a brave Apache woman shared the first days of an unlikely friendship. It had begun with fear and injury, but it was growing into something deeper. An understanding of what it meant to care, to trust, and to connect across differences. The plains stretched endlessly beyond the cabin, wild and untamed. Yet inside, a quiet warmth and companionship blossomed. In those days, the woman learned that sometimes the world could surprise you with goodness, and even in solitude, one could find a bond that would change the course of life forever. The days after her fall passed slowly but steadily. The Apache woman's leg was beginning to heal, though every step was still painful. She had grown used to the small cabin, to the quiet rhythms of the farmer's life, and to the gentle comfort of his presence. Each morning the sun would rise over the plains, filling the cabin with soft light, and each evening the fire in the hearth would glow warmly, casting shadows that danced across the walls. The world outside remained vast and wild, but inside, a quiet life had formed, one where healing, care, and companionship intertwined. The farmer had proven to be patient beyond what she had expected. Every day he would check her leg, adjusting the splint he had made from wood and cloth. He washed the wound carefully, applied herbs to reduce swelling, and ensured that she had enough food and water. Each action was done with quiet precision, without a hint of impatience. She began to notice the way he moved, how carefully he handled every object, how his eyes lingered on details that others might miss. It was the attention to small things that revealed his deep sense of care. She tried to speak to him more, asking questions about his life. Though she did not understand all his words, she could tell he wanted to explain. He pointed to his fields outside, to the small garden he tended near the cabin, and gestured toward tools he used. She watched with fascination. His life was simple, but it was rich in quiet strength and skill. She thought about her own people, how they valued bravery and independence, and realized that his quiet, steadfast way of living was a different kind of courage. The Apache woman began to help him in small ways, as much as her injured leg allowed. She chopped vegetables, arranged herbs, and tidied the small cabin. It was not much, but it gave her a sense of purpose. Each day she learned a little more about him, about the care he put into every task, about the patience he extended to her. Slowly she began to trust him completely, and with trust came a growing sense of comfort. The fear that had gripped her after her fall was fading, replaced by gratitude and admiration. One morning, the farmer decided she was strong enough to try walking a short distance outside. He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight carefully. She took her first steps in the fresh air since the fall, the cool breeze brushing her face, carrying the scents of the plains. Her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and fear. Each step sent a jolt of pain through her leg, but the farmer's steady hands kept her balanced. She smiled at him, and though he did not smile often, his eyes softened in response, revealing the quiet pride he felt in her progress. The horse, which had stayed near the cabin since the accident, watched them carefully. The woman reached out to stroke its mane, feeling the familiar warmth of her companion. Narration. The animal had been a source of comfort during the long nights, and seeing it again outside brought a sense of normalcy and hope. The plains stretched endlessly around them, wild and untamed. Yet here, in this small patch of earth near the cabin, life seemed to settle into a gentle rhythm of care, trust, and quiet beauty.
As the days passed, they continued this routine.
The woman's leg grew stronger, and she began to move more freely. The farmer guided her, teaching her to balance and walk steadily, without fear. Each day brought small victories. Standing without support, walking a few steps on her own, even climbing a small slope near the cabin. With each success, her confidence grew, and she began to feel the spark of independence returning. She had always been proud of her courage, but now she realized that bravery could also mean accepting help when it was needed. The Apache woman and the farmer spent hours talking, sharing stories through gestures, simple words and expressions. She told them about her people, about the customs and traditions she cherished, and about the vast lands they roamed. He listened carefully, asking questions through gestures and short words, trying to understand. Though they came from different worlds, they began to understand each other deeply. Their friendship was growing, built on trust, care, and the recognition of each other's strength. One afternoon, as the sun began to lower in the sky, they decided to take a short walk toward a nearby hill. The farmer held her hand, guiding her carefully along the uneven ground. She felt nervous at first, fearing a misstep, but his calm presence reassured her. As they reached the top of the hill, the plains stretched out endlessly before them, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. She gasped at the beauty, realizing how vast and free the world could be, and yet how safe it felt when shared with someone who cared. The farmer pointed toward the horizon, gesturing at distant mountains and valleys. Though she did not understand all the words, she understood the meaning behind them. A shared admiration for the land, a recognition of the beauty around them. She felt a bond forming, a quiet understanding that transcended words. In this moment, the Apache woman realized that the farmer was more than just a helper. He was a companion, someone who had come into her life at a moment of need and stayed with patience, kindness, and unwavering care. Back at the cabin, they continued their routine of tending to her leg, preparing meals, and sharing small moments of joy. The woman noticed the way the farmer worked, how he carefully watered the plants, tended to the small garden, and repaired tools. He seemed to find satisfaction in simple things, in tasks that others might consider ordinary. She realized that there was a strength in this simplicity, a power in steady, quiet work, and a beauty in living in harmony with the land. The bond between them deepened as the days passed. She began to share small details about her own life, memories of her childhood, stories of adventures on the plains, and lessons she had learned from her elders. He listened attentively, responding with gestures, small nods, and occasional words. She realized that while their languages and cultures were different, they shared a common understanding of life, of courage, and of the value of kindness. Each day brought them closer, a connection forged through care, patience, and shared experience. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the plains in shades of orange and purple, the woman realized how much she had come to rely on the farmer's presence. He had been her support, her guide, and her protector during the most difficult time of her life. She felt a deep gratitude and a quiet admiration for his strength, patience, and kindness. Though she had always prided herself on her independence, she now understood that accepting help was not a sign of weakness, but a way to grow stronger and form meaningful connections. The nights in the cabin became a time of quiet reflection and gentle companionship. They would sit by the fire, sharing warmth and comfort, watching the flames dance and listening to the wind outside. The Apache woman found solace in these moments, feeling a sense of peace she had not known before. She thought about her people, her family, and the vast plains she loved, and she realized that sometimes life's greatest lessons came from unexpected sources. The farmer had taught her patience, kindness, and the importance of trust, lessons she would carry with her forever. During these days, small routines and gestures became their way of communicating care and understanding. The farmer would bring her water and food, tend to her leg, and offer gentle guidance. The woman, in turn, would help with simple tasks, offer smiles, and share stories. Narration. Their bond was growing, not through grand gestures, but through consistent, quiet acts of kindness and mutual respect. They had come to rely on each other, forming a partnership that transcended words, culture, and background.
As her leg healed, the Apache woman began to regain confidence in her movements. She could walk longer distances with less support, climb small hills, and even practice gentle stretches to strengthen her muscles.
Narration. Each day brought a sense of accomplishment, a reminder of her resilience and courage. She also realized how much she had learned from the farmer. Patience, attention to detail, and the quiet strength that came from living in harmony with the land. Their companionship had become a source of strength, comfort, and inspiration for both of them. The woman began to notice small changes in herself. She felt a deeper sense of gratitude, not just for the farmer's help, but for the way life had brought them together. She reflected on the accident, the fall, and the long hours of pain and uncertainty, and realized that it had led to something unexpected, a friendship built on trust, care, and mutual respect. She had always believed that independence was the greatest strength, but now she understood that true courage could also mean accepting help and forming meaningful connections with others. By the end of the third week, the Apache woman was able to move almost freely with minimal assistance. Her leg had healed significantly, though she still felt some stiffness and tenderness. The farmer continued to support her, guiding her steps, offering encouragement, and sharing quiet moments of companionship. Their relationship had grown beyond the simple roles of helper and injured person. It had become a bond of friendship, trust, and mutual understanding. Even the horse seemed to sense the change. It would nuzzle her gently when she approached, and stand calmly by the farmer as they worked together. Narration. The plains, once a place of danger and isolation, now felt like a space of shared life, care, and quiet beauty. The Apache woman realized that in the midst of hardship, she had found something precious, a connection with another human being that transcended fear, pain, and solitude. Narration.
As they sat by the fire one evening, watching the flames flicker and listening to the wind outside, she felt a deep sense of peace.
Her farmer, with his quiet strength, patience, and kindness, had shown her the power of care, trust, and human connection. She knew that the coming days would bring new challenges, but she felt ready to face them, strengthened by the bond they had formed. In the small cabin on the edge of the plains, two lives had come together in a way neither had expected, and a story of healing, friendship, and quiet courage was unfolding. The days grew longer and the sun warmed the plains with a soft golden glow. The Apache woman had begun to walk freely with little assistance, and the cabin felt like a place of safety, comfort, and quiet joy. Each morning she would wake to the smell of fresh bread baking or herbs simmering in a small pot over the fire. The farmer, with his quiet routines and gentle care, had become an essential part of her daily life, and she had grown deeply grateful for his presence. Even though they spoke in short words and gestures, their communication had grown rich in meaning. They shared laughter over small things, like the horse's playful nudges or a clumsy spill of water while preparing meals. These small moments brought lightness to their days, and she realized that friendship could grow even without perfect understanding of language. Each day she felt herself opening up more, telling him stories of her life, of her people, and of the plains she loved so dearly. The farmer, in turn, shared glimpses of his own life. She learned that he had chosen a quiet existence long ago, working the land, tending his crops and living close to nature. Though he lived alone, there was no loneliness in his heart. He had the ability to care deeply for others. And this moment with her had awakened something within him that he had not felt for years. Inspiration. She admired him not only for his skill and strength, but for his kindness, patience, and the quiet wisdom in his actions. One morning, after a particularly restful night, she decided to explore the small garden near the cabin. The farmer walked beside her, steadying her steps, and together they moved among the rows of herbs, vegetables, and wildflowers. She noticed the care he had put into each plant, the attention to detail, and the patience it took to nurture life from the soil. It reminded her of the careful preparation her people took in tending the land and preserving life. Though their ways were different, they shared the same respect for the earth and its gifts. As they worked, she began to laugh, a sound that had been rare since her accident. The farmer looked at her, and though he rarely smiled openly, she could see a quiet warmth in his eyes. The moments they shared in the garden became a time of connection, a rhythm of cooperation and gentle companionship. They did not need many words, their actions spoke for them. She felt herself growing stronger not only in body but in spirit, her courage and independence returning in new ways, tempered by the kindness and trust she had come to rely on. Days turned into weeks, and the Apache woman's leg healed completely. She could walk, run, and ride her horse again, though she still favored caution. The farmer encouraged her every step of the way, never rushing her, always patient and supportive. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the plains, they decided to ride the horse together for the first time since her accident. She climbed carefully onto the saddle, the farmer guiding her movements, ensuring she felt secure. The horse nuzzled her gently, sensing her excitement and confidence. They rode slowly at first, then a little faster, the plains stretching endlessly before them. The wind rushed through her hair, carrying with it a sense of freedom and exhilaration.
She laughed aloud, a clear, bright sound that echoed across the open land.
The farmer rode beside her, steady and reassuring, and she realized that together they had created a new sense of freedom, one built not only on physical ability, but on trust, care, and shared experience. In that moment, she understood that courage could be found in connection as much as in independence. Over the following days, they continued to explore the lands surrounding the cabin. She showed him hidden streams, patches of wildflowers, and gentle hills where the wind carried the scent of the plains. He listened with interest, asking questions through gestures, learning from her knowledge and perspective.
She realized that he had never left his own land extensively, yet he was eager to understand and experience the beauty of the world through her eyes. It was a silent partnership of learning and respect, each teaching the other lessons in patience, awareness, and appreciation of life.
One evening, as the sky turned pink and orange, she prepared a simple meal with his guidance. They sat together by the fire, sharing the food and stories, their laughter mingling with the crackle of the flames.
She felt a warmth in her heart, a growing affection for this man who had appeared in her life in her darkest moment. He had not only healed her body but had nurtured her spirit, showing her that care, patience, and kindness could create deep and lasting bonds. She realized that sometimes the greatest connections were unexpected and could transform lives in ways neither person imagined. The farmer, too, began to reveal more of himself. He told her, in gestures and simple words, about his childhood, the struggles he had faced, and the reasons he had chosen a quiet life. She listened intently, understanding through his tone, his expressions, and his careful actions. She admired his honesty and humility, recognizing the courage it took to live a life so quietly and intentionally. She began to see him not only as a helper but as a friend and companion, someone whose presence had become vital to her sense of security and happiness. As the days grew warmer, she decided to help the farmer with more demanding tasks. They repaired fences, carried firewood, and tended the garden together. Though she had been independent before, she now approached these tasks differently, appreciating the value of shared effort. Together they laughed when mistakes happened, a spilled bucket of water, a broken branch, or a clumsy stumble, and celebrated small victories like a newly repaired fence or a particularly healthy row of vegetables. These shared experiences strengthened their bond, creating a rhythm of companionship that was both practical and deeply emotional. One morning she noticed how quietly the farmer worked, never seeking recognition or praise. She admired his diligence, patience, and ability to care for both the land and another human being with the same dedication. She realized that true strength did not always show itself in grand actions. Often it revealed itself in quiet moments of care, in patience, and in steady, thoughtful attention to others. Her admiration for him grew, and she felt a sense of respect that went beyond gratitude, a recognition of his character, his courage, and his humanity. Over time, their companionship became a source of comfort and joy. They shared quiet evenings by the fire, walks through the plains, and rides on the horse. They exchanged stories, gestures, and laughter, finding ways to communicate across differences in language and culture. She began to feel a deep trust in him, a belief that he would always be there, patient, kind, and steady. In return, he relied on her presence, her knowledge of the land, and her spirit, which brought a vitality and lightness into his quiet life. The Apache woman also reflected on her own growth. She had faced fear, pain, and uncertainty after her fall, yet she had discovered resilience she had not fully recognized before. She realized that strength could come from many sources, not only from independence and courage, but from trust, kindness, and human connection. The farmer had taught her that even the most solitary people could carry deep warmth and understanding, and that friendship could grow in the most unexpected places. One evening, as the wind whispered through the plains and the stars began to appear, they sat together outside the cabin, watching the sky. She spoke softly, pointing at the stars, sharing stories of constellations her people had observed for generations. He listened intently, nodding and gesturing, clearly captivated by her stories. In those quiet moments, they shared a profound understanding. Life was vast, unpredictable, and sometimes dangerous, but connection, care, and trust could create beauty and meaning even in the harshest of landscapes. As the night deepened, she realized how much she valued his presence. He had not only healed her body but had nurtured her spirit, showing her the power of patience, care, and quiet companionship. Their bond had become something rare and precious, a partnership built not on necessity alone, but on respect, understanding, and shared experience. She knew that when the time came for her to leave, their connection would remain a lasting part of her life, a memory of kindness and trust that would shape her future.
The days continued to flow in gentle rhythms of work, care, exploration, and shared moments.
The Apache woman had regained her strength and independence, yet she had discovered a deeper understanding of life, friendship, and human connection. The farmer, too, had been touched by her presence, reminded that even in a quiet, solitary life, companionship could bring warmth, joy, and meaning. Together, they had created a world within the vast plains, a world of trust, care, laughter, and quiet courage. And so, in the small cabin on the edge of the plains, the Apache woman and the farmer shared the days of recovery, exploration, and growing friendship. Their bond had strengthened, not through words alone, but through acts of care, trust, and shared experiences. She had regained her strength, but more importantly, she had discovered the beauty of human connection, the kind that could endure across differences in background, language, and culture. In this quiet, simple place, they had built a sanctuary, not just of physical safety, but of trust, understanding, and friendship that would last far beyond the plains themselves. The sun rose slowly over the plains, spilling soft golden light across the fields and hills. The Apache woman stretched, feeling the strength in her legs and the freedom in her movements. She had fully recovered now, walking and riding without any assistance. The small cabin, once a place of refuge, had become a home in its own way, a place of warmth, care, and quiet companionship. But today she knew. Her journey would take her back to her village, back to the people who had been waiting for her. The thought of leaving filled her with mixed emotions. She was grateful for the recovery of her leg, grateful for the safety she had found, but most of all, she was grateful for the farmer, Bert. He had been her protector, her guide, and her friend. From the moment he had answered her cries for help, he had shown her patience, kindness, and unwavering support. Their days had been filled with shared labor, quiet conversations, laughter, and understanding that transcended words. She realized that in his presence she had discovered a new kind of strength, a strength rooted in trust, friendship, and human connection. As she prepared to leave, the farmer stood quietly nearby, watching her with calm eyes. She noticed a softness in his gaze that he rarely showed. He had remained steady, patient, and kind throughout her recovery, never rushing her, never demanding anything, only offering support, inspiration. She felt a swell of gratitude and respect. The words were few, their meaning was deep. She wanted to express all she felt, but the right words seemed impossible to find. Instead, she nodded, smiled softly, and extended her hand to him. He took her hand gently, giving it a firm yet tender squeeze. His eyes spoke volumes. Pride in her courage, happiness in her recovery, and a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they had formed. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, a mixture of sadness and appreciation.
Though they had spent weeks together learning from and caring for each other, the thought of parting was almost unbearable.
She realized that the farmer had changed her life, teaching her lessons she would carry forever. The power of patience, the importance of trust, and the deep value of kindness. Before leaving, she prepared the horse, brushing its coat and securing the saddle. The animal had been her companion through injury and healing, standing faithfully by her side. She looked at the farmer who had guided her every step, ensuring her safety and comfort. He watched her quietly, his presence steady, yet there was a hint of sadness in his posture. Subtle but real. The silence between them was filled with understanding. No words were needed to express the depth of gratitude, the shared memories, and the bond that had grown stronger than either had expected. When she finally mounted her horse, she felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She was ready to return to her people, to resume her life in the village, but leaving the farmer behind felt strange, almost painful. He stepped forward, adjusting the reins and ensuring she was secure. She reached out to him one last time, and he gave her a reassuring nod. In that small gesture, they both understood that their connection was not ending. It had been forged in trust, care, and shared experience, and it would remain a part of them forever. As she rode away, the plains stretched endlessly before her, familiar yet transformed by the time she had spent in the farmer's company. Each step of the horse carried her forward, but her mind lingered on the cabin, the fire, and the quiet man who had changed her life. She felt a mixture of sadness and joy, sadness at leaving someone who had become dear to her, joy at the healing, growth, and connection they had shared. The plains were vast and open, yet her heart was full of memories and gratitude. The journey back to her village was filled with reflection. She remembered the fall, the fear, the long hours of waiting, and the sharp pain in her leg. She remembered the first moment the farmer had appeared, bringing safety, warmth, and care. She thought about the days spent healing, the shared labor, the laughter, and the quiet evenings by the fire. Each memory reminded her that life could be unpredictable, and that sometimes help and friendship came from the most unexpected places.
When the village finally appeared on the horizon, she felt a sense of familiarity and belonging.
Her family and friends had surely been worried, and she imagined their relief and joy at seeing her safe and healthy again. Yet even as she anticipated the reunion, her thoughts returned to the farmer. Psh! She hoped that he would remain well, tending his land and finding comfort in the quiet life he had built. She hoped that, somewhere in the vast plains, he would think of her as she thought of him, remembering their shared days of care, trust, and companionship. Upon reaching the village, she was greeted with hugs, smiles, and expressions of concern. Her family marveled at her strength and resilience, grateful that she had survived the fall and healed fully. She told them of her journey, her accident, and her time at the farmer's cabin, though she spoke carefully, not wanting to exaggerate or make it seem like a fairy tale. She wanted them to understand the truth, the kindness, care, and friendship that had saved her and changed her perspective on life. Though her family rejoiced in her return, her heart remained connected to the plains and the man who had helped her. She understood that life in the village would resume, but a part of her would always belong to the cabin on the edge of the fields, to the quiet farmer who had taught her lessons in patience, kindness, and human connection. She felt a deep gratitude for the experience, recognizing that even in hardship and injury, beauty and friendship could be found. As the days passed, she resumed her life in the village, participating in daily tasks, spending time with her family, and reconnecting with her people. Yet her thoughts often drifted to the plains, to the cabin, and to the farmer who had become an unexpected but unforgettable part of her life. She reflected on the lessons she had learned. Courage could exist alongside vulnerability, independence could coexist with trust, and human connection could bring strength in ways she had never anticipated. She decided to leave the farmer a small gift, something simple but meaningful, a piece of cloth dyed with the colors of the plains, a symbol of her gratitude and remembrance. She hoped it would remind him of her, of the time they had spent together, and of the bond they had formed. Though they were separated by distance and circumstance, she understood that their connection was enduring, not tied to place, but to the shared experiences and emotions that had brought them together. Weeks later, the farmer returned to his daily life, tending the land, caring for his animals, and maintaining the cabin. He thought often of the Apache woman, remembering her courage, warmth, and the light she had brought into his quiet life. Though he rarely expressed his feelings openly, he carried the memory of their time together as a source of joy and reflection. He understood that their bond had been transformative, a reminder that even a life lived in solitude could be enriched by connection, kindness, and shared experience. The Apache woman continued to live with her people, but she carried the lessons of the plains and the farmer in her heart. She spoke to her friends and family about courage, trust, and the unexpected beauty of human connection. She reflected on how even a moment of accident or misfortune could lead to profound change, how help could come from unexpected sources, and how bonds formed in times of vulnerability could shape a life in ways that nothing else could. Occasionally she would think of the cabin, the fire, the garden, and the farmer's steady presence. She imagined him walking through his fields, tending his crops, and smiling quietly to himself. In those moments, she felt a mixture of longing and comfort, knowing that their shared experience had left an indelible mark on both their lives. The plains, once the site of fear and pain, now represented hope, growth, and the quiet power of human kindness. As time passed, she told her children and younger people of her journey, of the fall and the farmer's care, and of the lessons she had learned about trust, patience, and the strength found in friendship. Her story became more than a tale of recovery. It became a story of human connection, resilience, and the enduring impact of simple, thoughtful acts of kindness. She emphasized that true courage was not only facing danger but also opening one's heart to others, accepting help, and forming bonds that could last a lifetime. Years later, she still remembered the farmer with deep gratitude. Though they were separated by distance and circumstance, the bond they had formed continued to influence her life.
She reflected on the accident, the recovery, and the days spent together with warmth and reverence.
That period had taught her that life's most meaningful experiences often came from the unexpected, and that true human connection could endure across time, distance, and circumstance. In the end, the Apache woman realized that the plains, the accident, and the farmer had changed her in ways she could never have imagined. She had faced fear, pain, and uncertainty, yet had discovered courage, resilience, and the beauty of human connection. The farmer had shown her that kindness could be transformative, that trust could create deep bonds, and that friendship could flourish even in the most unlikely places. She carried these lessons forward, knowing that the experience would remain a guiding force in her life forever. And though they were apart, the memory of the lonely farmer and the brave Apache woman lingered, a story of healing, compassion, and the quiet, enduring power of care. Life in the village continued. The plain stretched endlessly beyond, and somewhere in the vast land, two hearts remembered each other, connected forever by trust, kindness, and the unforgettable moments they had shared.